Well, again, excited to kind of chat about all things kind of cash flow and everything. I think like Chris, if I wanted to just like tee things up, be kind of before we get into the origin story, I really, since you're the cash flow guy, I really want you to kind of start us off with just like the ugliest cash flow moment that personally had stuck with you.
Hmm.
And maybe that's kind of the catalyst behind what you had stuck with. And I'm sure Keith has some stories too, but I would love for you to start there.
I mean, it's probably my own, candidly, if that's a fair comment. I know what it feels like to have $0 or, be spending money that I don't have and at the grocery store and buying groceries and like, is this gonna actually work? And so I don't know that I would say like deep empathy. That's probably the wrong word. That doesn't mean I don't have that, but I very much relate to this. And I think there is a connotation in all cash flow that tries to relate a business cash flow to that moment that many of us have had as like, I don't have money that I need to spend. And there's an embarrassment and a personal piece of that, which is not correct, in my opinion. And that a business operates, a very healthy business has cash flow problems. They're just prepared for them and they have the right tools to solve for that. A very, I wouldn't, maybe not a very bad business, but a bad business does not have cash flow problems. Certainly sorry, let me say that a different way. Certainly a subcontractor that does not have cash flow problems is likely a bad business.
Mhm.
And that is because they're subject to the same things that every other sub does. Now, maybe they're electrical contractor working on data centers only, and they're getting paid 30 days in advance. Absent that group, that means they've capitalized their business in a very inefficient way. And so I think it's more that connotation. Now, your first question was like, what's the worst? Like it's not like it goes from like deep red to deep purple and like keeps going. There's an end, right? And so the worst I see is just what we see in bankruptcy, right? So it's tough. Like it sneaks up quickly for contractors, and I don't know if you guys have been on front row seat on those, but we certainly have, and it's really tough. I mean, when you think you have a problem to where you've hit the limit is quite quick.
I think Keith's chuckling because he's seen a couple of those days.
Yeah, one of my one of my favorite one of my favorite business analogies is like it doesn't matter how much you can bill if you never get it, right? Like there's this dichotomy, and contractors, we're generally in the trade we're in because we're not super organized, and we just think we can do the trade better. So we start out with this resentment, which creates a company, and then we have to fill in all the stuff that goes behind it. And one of the things that I know for a ton of my peers, they don't take into, when they put numbers together, the timeline that people pay, when bills are, like, they don't balance when bills are due, when people pay, how much retainage is coming out, right? Like if you bid a job at 6% and there's a 10% retainage, you just went 4% net negative until that job is closed out
Yeah,
many months from now.
yeah.
And I think people are so short-sighted in getting work that they forget that they still have to pay everything in the process.
Well, I go a step further to say not just getting work, but keeping the customer happy. That's probably the one of the biggest things we see from new companies to mature companies is being unapologetic
Mhm.
about the way they manage their cash flow with their customers and suppliers, and where they are quite abrupt with their customers. And hey, I'm not going to continue working after this threshold. And it takes a few of those moments to go through as a business owner to say, I'm not going to fucking do that again.
Mhm.
And then they have that conviction to say, hey, look, I just can't do it. Oftentimes, that's really the driver behind the expediency of which you're paid is stopping working. And like, when do you do that? That's always the question, especially if it's a very shallow. It's like you're expecting to get paid in, let's say, 30 days from approval, and it's day 40. Like that's a little short, but also that's real. Who's covering those 10 days?
Yeah.
You have a lot of customers, right? A lot of customers to keep happy. So that has to come from somewhere. Um,
Yeah, I think one of the things that people, we're so desperate early on when cash is tight that we're like yes to everything. And then when you figure out that you actually have some say in the process, there is kind of a special moment when it dawns on you that, oh, hey, we're two adults. We're like two autonomous human beings. I could have an opinion on this.
Yeah.
And I know we've done, there's some contractors that are like, this is a great story. This guy says, you don't trust me when, like, there's lien dates are different, and like how you make sure you get paid is different in every state. And that's a whole different conversation. But this guy looks at me and goes, you don't trust me? We've done business for years. And I said, it's not personal, man. Like, if you don't pay me by a certain date and the state says I have to file this, like, that's what we're going to do. But more than that, you used to pay your bills at 30 to 40 days, and now it's taking 75 to 110. Like, you're not the same person and we're not the same person. Like, the relationship is dynamically changed, and we need to be clear about this being something that we're not okay with.
Yeah.
And we're like, we're going to pull that off the schedule. And he's like, I'm going to have somebody else do the work. I'm like, again, fully your option, but we're not going to continue being your bank. Really, that's what we figured out, is that we were financing other people's stuff.
The trust is an important part, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, hey, look, I do trust you, but you're not the one that controls this, right? If you're the project manager, what happens when you don't get paid?
Mm.
What happens when this other thing that's outside of your control? And that's what I'm trying to prevent for. And you have to respect that for me to have a viable business. What if I started trusting all your competitors and I get the short stick and I'm on your project and I can't fulfill? Like, I have to operate my business this way. And yeah, I certainly trust you. And if you said it's in our bank account and it's going tomorrow and all the things, and yeah, we don't have a problem. But you haven't been paid, and if you have, if you haven't been paid, that's not in your control. So I don't know who your owner is. I don't have a contract with them, meaning the property owner.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think a lot of this goes back to just being clear about your expectations. Like, let's walk into this telling people what we want on the front end and saying, hey, this is what we expect. And if it's not working out, this is the consequence. And the piece that in me has developed over the years, and I get the sense from you, Chris, that this is something that just comes natural for you, at least now, is boundaries are super healthy, and it keeps everybody safe to
Yeah,
say, hey, this is my expectation of you. If you cannot meet that, then that's going to change the way that our relationship looks. It's not a, it's not a, it's not a character assassination. It's just a fact, right? If you're paying slow, we're just going to change the way we do business.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this is something I emphasize with our team all the time and our customers. We tend to use the word like partner a lot, and whether that's intentional or we just want to be there for our customers. And I tell, oftentimes we get put in a spot where maybe we can't do everything our customer wants us to do for them. And, potentially they pull this card out of like, hey, I thought I had a partner. And it's like, hey, we need to define what a partner is. And here's what we are, here's our rules. But something adverse happens to your business. Like, this is how we will react to that. And every day that goes by, your credit profile really changes. And that's something that we evaluate as a company, and whether or not we can be there for you. And oftentimes when we can't be there for you, it's a fucking best thing for you, because it forces some things that are not pleasant before it gets too late. And that's tough, right? Because everyone's, if you're growing a business, God, you put fucking everything, right?
Mhm.
And sorry, I'm dropping F bombs here. Is that louder?
We got contractors that listen to this, so I think you're all right, Chris.
Yeah. The uh, I forget what I was saying there. All right.
I
That's
I
good.
think what I wanna do, I kinda wanna bring this a little bit high level and then kinda get into the details, Chris, but, like, I think the interesting thing about your background is you didn't come into this industry as an outsider to construction, like, you are living and breathing it. I want you to give kinda for the folks that don't know, build, like, give us a run through of how you got started. What kind of enlightened you to go after this cash flow issue that, is everybody's favorite relationship in the construction industry?
Yeah, I think the story of my career, is really, first of all, it started in construction, right? From when I was 16,
Mm,
framing houses, doing all the stuff. When I graduated from college at A&M. I started in construction. I've been in construction basically my entire life, right?
Mhm.
Um, there were some kind of odds and ends and weaves and whatnot. And when I got involved in, I've done so many types of construction, right? Like from like disaster recovery, big public projects, residential, kind of the whole thing.
Mhm.
A lot of energy efficiency, renewable energy, things like that. And when I got into renewable energy, that what drives that industry is that it's an asset that produces economic value, right? So it's like a cash flowing asset, which needs to be financed. So I very like quickly got thrown into the finance world. I went to business school, all that. So I had the concepts, but I didn't go into a finance space. And what I realized is I was very good at translating two languages of finance and construction. So on one way, making sure that the asset, which is the construction and asset, the solar asset in this case, was very well understood by the capital market side. And the same thing on the from a construction and solar side, making sure that the financing was very well understood.
Mhm.
And a lot of times those two don't mix super well, and you don't have experience in both. Both are quite simple. In fact, construction is way more complicated. Finance is actually the simpler one, and just essentially just translated that better. When we started build, look, I was in the renewable space, lending, um, cut my teeth there, and just said, hey, look, contractors are essentially using other types of financing to solve a working capital problem. And that is mispriced and the wrong structure. So why don't we just create products that solve that and price them accordingly? And so that's what we started build. I had really great investors at the time that I was already working with. And so, launched the company with a good, healthy equity check and then a warehouse facility to start lending. And really was, off to the races from there.
What was kind of that moment that triggered it for you of obviously somebody has to build a better way? I think this is just like the necessary evil that, they have to dance with the devil in the industry. So I'm kind of curious, like what pushed you over the edge, Chris, to try to go solve this?
Yeah, it's really an asset question, right? So you're defining an asset. In this case, we are categorically creating the asset of working capital and construction. So no one does it. We're the only ones. There are definitely some other providers here and there, but we are the only ones doing at the scale that we're doing. And to the deep problem that we are talking about, which is this very specific cash flow for subcontractors. And so really understanding that asset and then understanding the finance side. So the finance side tries to fill the asset, right? So you fill the asset maybe with a factoring product, a line of credit, a blah, 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 right? And you go, well, none of those are actually a fit. Why? Because the structure of the finance product, the risk profile, the pricing, all of those things, right, doesn't match. So it'd be like going to, buy a house and like, okay, I have my auto loan provider. Now that's extreme and it sounds really stupid, but that's the same thing when you show up with a working line of credit that a business working line of credit, typical UCC secured line of credit, all assets, all that stuff to solve a working capital problem in construction. It doesn't work. It's the wrong size. It's the wrong price. It's the wrong everything. Can you kind of do it here and there? Yeah, you can, but you really need a custom solution to solve for the asset. And so the asset is working capital, and that's really what we focus on.
So if people are listening to this and you were just a Joe Schmo that didn't realize that you had a cash flow problem, what would the symptoms look like in your life? What are those symptoms that show up to the people that get a hold of you guys to try to solve?
Yeah, I think that's one of the trickier parts of our business is that the real symptom you don't see and you don't see until it's too late. So let me give you an
Mm.
example. And we do a good job of showing this to our customers in a calculator. Your working capital can only be solved by a handful of ways. Okay. So you start at zero. Let's say everyone starts at zero. You inject cash into the business. That is an investment, right? So it's the equity of the business owner puts cash in, right? Every business starts like that in some degree. But what you're not doing in commercial construction, generally you're not going out and raising $5 million in equity, right? Where you bring in traditional investors, right? So we kind of rule that out as an option. It starts in founder mode, right? Where you have to do some stuff, right? So that's really out. The other option you have is, of course, working line of credit with a bank. You have supplier terms, and that is a working capital form of working capital. You're buying something and you don't have to pay for it for 30 days. So what I'm describing is your capital stack, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that you take your net profit in cash. So you do a project for $1 million, you have $100,000 in profit, right? That tends to mask your working capital problem, because what does that do? It funds future projects. There's no other way. There's no, like, we can go through the math. There's no other way for dollars to be into the business and solve for this gap, which is you pay for stuff here and you don't get paid for here. So that gap gives you a certain dollar amount given your revenue, and you have to fill that somehow, right? And so what it tends to be is the undiscovered thing is that you're using a ton of your net profit of cash to fuel your business. Well, that's super fucking wrong, right? So many reasons, right? One is just your profit is meant to be distributed to the business owner. Certainly there is a concept of reinvesting into your business, but damn, you build out a $30 million electrical business over 15 years, right? You are, it is, unfortunately, and I don't mean this the wrong way, but like, unfortunately, you are a couple projects completely out of your control
Mm.
going wrong to having to shut your business down. You could have the best business in the world and some things can happen, and you have to protect yourself, right? You can't always put your, what is effectively your net worth, right? Profits into your business. So you've got to take money off the table, right? And you have to be aware of how that mechanism works and how at least be aware of it. I'm not telling you have to take it off the table, but at least be aware of it. Don't come to me and say you don't have a problem. The problem is that you've masked it with a bunch of net profit that's covering this issue, right? Now we're all, as here, our purpose is to say, to show them that and make sure that they understand. And then they make the decision. No, this is a personal choice for me as the business owner. I'm either going to allow this and just know that, at least, but at least I know it. And I tell our sales team all day long, look, if a customer doesn't want to use a product, super fair, right? But they cannot think they don't have a problem, right? They cannot think that. They have to understand this cash issue. And generally what you're trying to do is create a balance between your working capital. And your working capital goes from most flexible to least flexible, right? If I got to pay your 8 crews, right, is payroll, I can't use supplier terms for that, right? And so that's a form of working capital, but it's not very flexible. It can only pay for certain things,
Mhm.
right? It's like going to, you know, the grocery stores and pulling out your fucking Chili's gift card. Like, they're like, no, you can't pay for that. So so the goal is to use up the things that you can that are least flexible on those things as much as possible, obviously with cost in mind, right? And leave yourself the most flexible thing. Well, what's the most flexible thing? Cash, right? And it's not even line of credit. Line of credit is up there because line of credit is flexible, but you haven't drawn on it. So you have a scenario where you think it's there, you think it's flexible, and the bank says, no, not approved, right? Because they're monitoring every single heartbeat of the company. And they know, and it is not uncommon for them. I mean, just like any lender, to say, actually, no, I can't approve this one because something changed. Maybe we got a new risk officer, all kinds of things that are out of their control. So it's really balancing that flexibility in your options and being aware of it. And this is not that complicated, but you have to have one person in your company, your controller, whoever it is, your accountant, and they have got to be accountable to managing that and reporting to the business owner every freaking day. If there's one piece of advice I could give all customers, all subcontractors, look, this is your business, right? This is your livelihood. This is everything. This is just like safety, right? Safety is the number one thing. You've got a safety manager. You've got all these checklists. Where's your fucking cash flow checklist, right? Have that reported to you every single day. So you at least know and can recognize where you are throughout that journey, throughout those stages.
When somebody goes through that evaluation process, Chris, like somebody that hasn't, I mean, we have customers that have used Build, but like when they're going through that process, what things are you evaluating? What questions? You mentioned like the cash flow checklist, but also like evaluating Build too. Where would you start? What advice would you give a self performer or sub if they're evaluating a solution
Evaluating the
like?
different options.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there's a flexibility concept. There's capacity, right? So the bigger you are, the more capacity that you need in working capital. And the whole thing is, in working capital, you need way more than you think. and you always want to have the options, right? To the extent that something happens, that doesn't mean you have to use it. So when I think about evaluation, like what are the requirements? What are prepayments? What is the pricing? How does this all roll up into a weighted cost? So that's another thing people have to think about. They look at our costs and they say, well, that costs like 2%, let's say. Well, 2% against what? Like, what if I paid your supplier up front and they give you a 3% discount? Now who's cheaper? We are. Like, so you have to, this is just math, but you have to think about it from a finance perspective, weight each one of those things, know your weighted costs. You'd be surprised, like it moves the needle at all on your mix, and be just super proactive and get as much as you can. Right. It's really like, this is what I think we are as a company very much underappreciated by our customers. We provide this kind of open thing, which says use it whenever you want. Now we are doing regular diligence and things like that. There is like at all, whatever, 300,000 subcontractors, 100% need to have a line of credit bill. There's usually no question. There's
Mhm.
no reason not to. We don't charge anything. We don't do any, right? There's no reason for them not to come in and be a customer and maybe even never use it. But to not have an option is like the most ridiculous thing ever. If I, as a business, right, we're a super different business, right? We're lending finance company. Like, any available option we have that isn't going to require certain, like, that doesn't cost anything to leave open, we would have, right? Because you never know, and we have cash flow issues, right, from time to time, and so we need those levers. So I think about, like, evaluation is kind of a tricky thing because it's kind of
Mhm.
like, what are my options, right? But as a subcontractor, you need all of the options. Now, what you use can be carefully curated and should be heavily scrutinized at a month-to-month level for cost, right? But also like available capacity.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned in the last 4 or 5 years of really diving in with not just in my business, but in, kind of getting into the ground floor in other people's businesses, like walking in and saying, what are your problems? Where are the strengths and weaknesses? Um, and you hit it on the head just now. Like, you can't get money if you need it.
I know that's the problem. Yeah,
So when is the best time to go and find those resources that can shore up the cash flow? It's when you actually don't have a problem. And that is a hard thing to be proactive about, because we're contractors are like one dumpster fire to the next, right? Like one crisis to the next crisis.
yeah,
Um, what one of the things that I've recently advised people, I've seen a lot, like you were talking about how it doesn't show up, how cash flow, either your supplier terms, like you've got these mini lines of credit that you call different things, right? Whatever the margin is. One of the ones that I tell people, I'm like, if you don't have a really strictly dedicated controller and somebody in the finance side that's really diligent in making sure they understand it, down payments will sink you before you even know that your house or your boat is on fire or has holes in it.
yeah,
Um, it's one of those things where, like, you're taking a 20% down payment on something to pay yesterday's bills. You have no idea that you're going backwards, but QuickBooks is going to tell you that you got an 18% profit margin.
yeah, yeah,
If you don't know what you're looking at, everything can be in the green or the black, and you are on a V line just for the Titanic's iceberg, and you have no idea.
yeah. And these things are tricky because there's not actually super great tracking for these things, and it is job costing is hard. And I don't mean it's not hard for 75 to 100 million in revenue business because they have a proper infrastructure that can manage these things. And, when you have the payroll that can break these things out and track time per crew to each project, that requires a certain level of infrastructure. And it's hard to have that infrastructure if you're, call it 5 to 7 million in revenue. Guess what? Like, 7, 8 million in revenue is a super legit contractor. And those subs do big fucking work. And they're working with the best GCs, and they show up super organized, right? And they do amazing work. They're hungry. They're responsible, all that stuff. But so that let's say that's 8 million in revenue, that supports some number of the year to pay for overhead. And that if that doesn't include the ability and people to do some of this stuff, it's a challenge because now you have the overhead of potentially your warehouse, your trucks, your maintenance, your of course your HR and benefits and tracking, and then it's like job costing is this other thing that gets thrown in there, and everyone wants to do it, but it's tough, but it should be the probably biggest like graduation step for subs to be like, yeah, I officially job cost. I think a lot of subs try to think about cash flow in a job cost way. I don't necessarily think about it because, like, who freaking cares if one of your projects is behind or ahead? Your organization is what matters. And you're always going to have some scenarios where one project is ahead of another and is kind of subsidizing yours. And who cares? That's okay. The only thing you need to do is make sure your machine is running. Now, job cost P&L certainly at the project level, but working capital at the project level to me is overkill and kind of doesn't matter.
So when you're taking a look at these businesses, are you looking at systems and processes, or are you just looking at the financials to give like yes or no on helping them?
I mean, we're looking at a lot of stuff. We don't do it, so it goes back to the asset, right? So the asset is what? Working capital. So why would why would the let's call it the complete cycle of working capital not be fulfilled? One would be, and that means we get paid back, right? So that's a nice way of saying that, but everyone gets paid back, right? So everyone gets their piece of what is supposed to happen in the ecosystem. So you look at that risk and you say, okay, well, it's a project. You're a sub on a project. Well, what's the project? Is it a gas station renovation? And, I hate to name a state, but like BFE somewhere and like, whatever, that who knows who the owner is, first time relationship, whatever. Or are we talking about a data center with Turner Construction, like there's a level of comfort and there's a risk profile there, right? Which is like,
Mhm.
is the whole cycle going to be completed based on the property type and the GC and the property owner, right? So some property types can be risky, like multifamily, where you see these things sometimes down the highway, and you're like, that's been sitting there for 3 years, that multifamily project. You see it in some renewable energy. You see this stuff, and that's a real project type that has risk. There's generally some GC risk, but I think of it more as like you're either perfectly fine, your Turners and your Balfour Beatties and your Hunts and like a couple projects going south are not going to phase them. Um, the property type and the improvement, because you have lien rights as a contractor. Well, those lien rights don't matter if the property is worth $100,000, right?
Yeah.
So if you put you put like a $2 million steel package on $100,000 property and they go lien it, well, they're not. I guess what they're not going to pay $2 million to release the lien because if the property is only worth 100,000, they just let it sit. Assuming you had everything perfected. You'd be surprised at the business. We certainly know business as well, and we know how to do that. But a lot of it does have more to do with these other attributes to make sure that, again, the process completes itself. What we're looking at a sub is like, what are your projects, and do you have like a healthy cycle? And you can see it. And are you in distress? And you can see it quickly. We actually don't look at financial statements. Sometimes we need to get a little deeper dive, but we're not like kind of that bank look. Now that would be for more of, hey, you're going to take this real estate loan and the business is responsible for paying that, right? That's a 3-4 year, but we're talking about a pretty short timeline of which working capital cycles through. So 4 months. And so we're just trying to make sure that thing keeps going.
Hmm.
Chris, you've mentioned it a few times now, and it's always kind of funny the relationship between GCs and subs. You've mentioned sub quite a few times already, and I think you guys have like described yourself as the champion of the sub, which I
Yeah.
absolutely admire. I think that's awesome. We focus on subs and specialty too. But how is that philosophy, whether you approach this whole problem in general? Because typically when you think of these things, like all the money and leverage is sitting up top with the GCs anyways. So
Mhm.
like why have you chosen to focus on this? It's probably where most of the pain exists in the first place. But I'm kind of curious, like how that philosophy has shaped how you guys approach this market and these types of customers too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fair to like when we started the business, it wasn't like I was waking up in the morning and going, I just want to be the champion of, blah, 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 who started, but I think there's a romantic part of our customers that is very much underappreciated by the broader industry. Right. And so let's go back even 20 years, right? Your Silicon Valley bro starts a business and they're this like entrepreneurial spirit and blah, blah. Well, fuck, let's talk about our customers, right? What did they do? They didn't leave a banker job, right? They didn't leave a Google job to start their business. They left a project management job likely, right? And they started with a relationship that they had, and that big leap. It normally is a contract that says, "Hey, I'll do a labor only or a sub of a sub." That first leap to start the business, right? That's as fucking entrepreneurial as it gets. And so I think part of when we started this business, we said, wait a second, what the hell, guys? Like, don't you know who these guys are? They're like great, right? And like, why do you like put these other companies on a pedestal and founders on a pedestal? These are real freaking founders. So it started with that. And then the more we grew the business, and we were really like a year and a half in, and we just realized like, damn, a lot of people say what we saw in the broader space was that, and I'll take suppliers out of this, but like technology and over all these providers, they were creating solutions for the GC. And then they would say, yeah, and we'll get those lowly subs to use it because the
Mm,
GC said they had to. Right. And we were like, fuck that. Like, this doesn't provide value for the sub. This is being told what to do. And do subs do that? Yes. And not like a Textura, right? Like they use Textura because they have to. That doesn't
mhm,
mean that it doesn't work for a sub, but that is the truth. Right. And so that product is made for GCs and that is their customer. And we found an opportunity then to say, nope, let's just put our fucking flag out and say, and by the way, GCs listening to this, everywhere else, our customer is the sub. Does that mean we're against the GC? Absolutely not. The sub only works if the GC works. But we're making products first and foremost for the subcontractor. And then it's like the more you dig in, it's like, actually, do they have anyone creating products just for them? And you find that there are very few. Everyone's trying to like ride that line, and we were just like, screw it, let's put our flag out. This is what we're going to do. And we do a lot of stuff with suppliers. We do a lot of stuff with GCs, and we're pretty unapologetic about it. And I think it gets us a lot of respect across the ecosystem that says, yeah, that's what these guys are, and they own it, and that's how they're going to make decisions around their business.
I thought some of the things that you've alluded to, and like you can correct me if I'm wrong. Like I'm hearing you talk, and if I were to go back 15 or 20 years, like my business would look different today based on having an option like build. Because back in 06, 07, 08, like it was the wild, wild west in some areas, but there was, not a ton of technology, and there was nothing built that was at least open that I was openly aware of that would come and help me overcome. And this is the thing, like when you are cash flow constricted, all of your opportunities go, like it's like they dry up with the cash flow, right? And you get safety by, you alluded to it earlier, like you might have some projects that are ahead and some that are behind, but the more projects you have, the more stable your environment, your ecosystem of your business is.
Yeah.
Like I have, and my dad is like we don't borrow money partner of mine. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, like
Yeah.
I understand we don't borrow money, but when we're talking about, I think the difference is we're not going to finance a Ferrari,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
what we should say is we're not going to leverage useless capital. If we need actual capital to go to work, like it falls into a different category. And I think there's some people that have touched the stove from the 08, 09 stuff and like just different circumstances. What would you tell people who are averse to this idea of borrowing or leveraging?
Yeah. I'd love to talk to your dad, first of all, but like, so what
Keith
let's just
Senior,
say,
get on here.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's just say you're a $20 million sub. Okay. And so in that, it depends on your supplier terms and depends on when you're getting paid by the GCs. But generally you're probably going to need about $4 million for that. right? In working capital, a little bit more, probably about 4.5 million. Okay. And so if you don't have a problem and you're using um, suppliers, you got great 60-day and all that fun stuff. You got a little bit of a line of credit. So let's it's that 4.5, first of all, divided by the 20, right? It's generally going to be in the 20% range. Banks normally would only give you a line of credit around 5. We have seen up to 10. But even if you were the very best and got 10, you can't use it. You can't use the whole thing because of bonding issues, right? They want to see that at least 50%. So what does that mean? That means that your cash is solving the problem for you. Okay. So why would you not want to borrow money? Okay. So the question is debt. I don't want to take on debt. Well, there's success of the business and there's not success. Success means it keeps going. Not success means you go bankrupt. To the extent you go bankrupt, what would you rather have drained all your cash that you never gave yourself or borrowed like every other business does, right? and had to basically foreclose on debt, had debt that didn't work out, right? What would you rather? At least, right, you were able to take something home out of your business. There's also some like tax considerations here when you just load up with cash, you don't distribute that, I'm not going to get into all that, but there's some tax consideration and optimization there too. But it just doesn't make sense. You think you're being conservative, right? You think you're being conservative. I don't borrow money. You're actually being quite aggressive in like your own responsibility, which is paying yourself. Because the conservative way is to take money off the table, right? Your business doesn't have a soul, right? Your people do, and you do. Your business does not, right? So just treat it as that vehicle, and make sure everyone's putting their blood, sweat, and tears going to the right souls, right? Not your business.
I
Your
love how you put
people, your
that. I
business
mean,
owner that took the risk initially, right? All those things.
Yeah, you're basically like this is what I've like as I hear you talk, like you are borrowing. It's just from the people you care about the most.
I mean, that's the thing. Like when you think about it this way, you're kind of like, oh yeah, like you said it better. Like you're borrowing from yourself and you're borrowing from your family and the generation, right?
Yep.
That money is legacy money, right?
Yeah.
When you're running 20, 30 million, that's real legacy money. That's not your money. You're not buying Ferraris with that. That's going to your family, right? That's going to your next generation. And that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
what changes on the ground, Chris? Like somebody that comes on board with you and just the things that you and Keith had alluded to. What are some like tangible things like when somebody comes on board with you? What changes for them? I feel like you have like a laundry list of things, but I think a lot of contractors come in, whether evaluating technology or a solution like yours, like they want to see, touch, feel it. It needs to be very real instead of kind of all this math and mathing,
Yeah.
as Keith put it, as somebody, the conservatives of the I mean, my family was like this too. Like everything was cash, like borrowing. Oh my God, stay the hell away from that. So like what's actually tangible if somebody's evaluating this? What changes for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's flexibility really, and monitoring cash flow at the high level with your business. I mean, we sell, working capital, so it's not like a lovely plant that sits on your desk or makes your trucks look cleaner or any of that. But I mean, I would say that look, when you have flexible working capital options and you're not freaking stressed about making payroll, you run your business better, right? You now you've got to have tight controls around expenses. Look, we're not free, right? And I don't advise. I advise, like I said, all 300,000 subs in the U.S. need to be on our platform, 100%. Does that mean they all need to be using us this month? Absolutely not, right? And that could be only maybe 5% in a given month, right? And then the next month, another 5%, and maybe a little overlap with the first, right? So it comes and goes, and that's how it should. We do not want our customers using us, all the time per se, right? And some do because they have a good little motion working, right? But I think that the real thing we're selling is flexibility, and allowing them to focus on running their business. I mean, this is why we say like our part of our mission statement is allow our customers to do the best work of their lives. They're not doing the best work of their lives. Wondering if they can make payroll.
Hmm. You've now seen both sides of the equation. I think you guys are moving into some GC products too that I want to chat on here in a second. But I'm kind of curious, like I've even seen this with some of your guys' content online too. I think you guys had some sessions where you talked to both like owners, you talked to GCs, you talked to subcontractors, and you talked to suppliers, right? I thought
Yeah.
those sessions were great. I'm
Those are
kind of
good,
curious.
huh? They
Yeah,
are
yeah,
good.
I like them.
Yeah.
I like. How often do you get everybody in the room to actually be
Yeah.
candid with each other, right?
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious, like from your perspective, after everything that you have learned and everything in the sessions and bringing all the parties together, what's something like each side typically gets wrong about each other?
Well, good question.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think look, each side is pretty focused on themselves, and rightfully so, right? GCs are, you know, w- getting their machine moving. Subs are doing the same. Suppliers are doing the same. Um, the we do like a market study every year, and it goes out. We have really good participation, actually, 700 ish, some responses, and a lot of mostly business owners, and mostly subs. And one in this last year, so the 2025 version, I threw in a question to the team, and I said, hey, let's, if they're a GC, because we have GCs that also take it, and I said, ask them when they think subs get paid on average, and then ask the same question to subs. Yeah, I knew it was going to be, I knew it was going to be a discrepancy, but I
Yeah.
can't remember the metrics off the top of my head. We're actually doing our other one right now. We got the
Hmm.
results. We're compiling everything. And it's like drastically different. It's
Really?
something, yeah. And,
Yeah, I
and
figured.
so, I mean, I think the biggest thing to me, and I've said this a lot, is just like GCs do not have the same urgency to pay subs as a sub does.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And in fact, it's the GC's, the subs well-being is the GC's risk. It's almost their only risk, right? As a business, is their subs being healthy. And so that's kind of a problem. But I understand the GC perspective, because they try to hold out as long as possible. Every day that goes by, they feel like it de-risks something because they're held money, right? The problem is that as long as they do that, it's like they're choking, right? And it's like, well, yeah, you let go and they can breathe, but
Hmm.
fuck, like if they'd have just been moving the whole time, how would they have executed? So it's a really tricky. I do think I know this wasn't a tee up to predictable pay in our product for that, but like I do think that ends up being a lot of the answer. Is more of an integrated solution that the GC who really controls a lot of this can offer a pretty
Mm.
attractive working capital solution. Um, you think about most, you don't see very many GC careers launch subcontracting businesses, right? Uh,
Yeah, no.
Now you do see the other way around, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Much more
Um,
common.
and I think that like says a lot about what GCs know about subs. And again, it's not meant to be a hit piece on GCs, but like that's real. They just don't know, and they are very, very different business models
Mhm.
structurally, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is a good segue, but I was kind of catching up on you guys, and you guys have, I think you've had some recent GC partnerships, and you guys are coming out with an early pay program, right, Chris? I'm kind of curious, and maybe you can dive into kind of what that means. But as we hear you talk and everything, and listeners are tuning into this, champion of the sub, you've put your flag in the ground and everything around the subcontractors, and I think that's admirable too.
Yeah.
But how do you stay true to the subs while collaborating closely with the GCs? Because I think that's a natural assumption, right? Where it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
okay, these guys are going to go to the GC, and all the money and leverage is going to sit up top, and they use us to get here. And I'm not saying that's an assumption that people, but some people might think that. But I imagine that's not how things are going to translate. But I'm kind of curious how you would tackle that.
Yeah. So let's go back to the asset, right? The asset of working capital, right? And where are those risks? Right? We kind of started with this, right?
Hmm.
Well, the risk is that the GC, the project type, things like that, don't pay on time. They don't complete the engine, right? So the number one influencer into this is the GC. So right or wrong, a GC at any given time can hold payment and choke out the sub, right? And yeah, maybe they get sued for it contractually. They should have paid it. They didn't, right? Maybe they get liens and all that stuff, but they can do it. Now, I don't think this is a common thing, right? But the more urgency that can be created at the GC level, the better. And anything you can do to release that sooner, right, with the consent of the GC solves so much, right? So the trick is when the GC influences the payment, the early release, right? It removes so much risk off the table. And when you remove risk off the table, you get way more participation by the cheapest financing sources. So big banks that offer the very lowest cost of debt. Okay. You also reduce the loss rates, right? Because now there's far fewer losses. What that ends up being is just a lower price for the sub. And so, predictable pay is a subcontractor product. It's just facilitated through the GC. So GC is essentially our channel. Now
Mm-hmm.
we will have
Mm-hmm.
obligations to the GC,
Yeah.
right? And we'll have reps and things like that. That's a really important part. And it's something that is does come up internally. Like how do we do this with that whole champion of the sub? But
Mm-hmm.
this is 100% a subcontractor product, and it
Mm-hmm.
is just fucking better for the sub. It's just
Yeah.
that's it. It's easier, it's faster, it's more efficient, and shoot, it's better for us too at build, right? So I believe this is really the answer. I believe in a few years that probably half of GCs will have a product like this,
Mm-hmm.
and that this will be widely available through us and other. I mean, there's nothing like terribly secret about the structure, so we're
Sure.
out there with GCs and whatnot, and so there'll be other providers that come in. Um, so I think it'll actually end up being a decently competitive space, which is
Mm-hmm.
also good, right,
Mm-hmm.
for market. But it's a subcontractor product for sure.
Yeah, I was initially gonna ask something, maybe you just haven't touched on it yet. I was initially gonna ask, like, is there a line that you don't cross between this relationship of a GC and sub? But I think kind of what you just elaborated on is you're seeing the GC as a channel. Still, the beneficiary of this is going to be the subcontractor because that's the product for them. But am I still right to ask the question if there's a certain line that you won't cross, or like how you should be thinking about that, or still is it seen as GC as the channel, beneficiary is?
Yeah, I mean, I think the right answer there is like the first and foremost, our obligation is to the company build, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And our shareholders, and like that's real, right? So
Mhm.
it doesn't matter. Goes back to that partnership approach with with
Yeah.
subs, right? That's what we're here for. We need to let them know, right? Like we're here and you're there, and that's this is our business and this is your business, and we are our business is really meant for you. But at the same time, we're never going to make a decision that's not good for our business just because it's good for you.
Mhm.
And so it really starts with us. And just like you would make a decision that is adverse to your company, right? So that we have that layer, that decision process, which is the business, then the sub, and the GC. There really are not. I haven't been approached with a scenario where we kind of have to pick between the GC and the sub, especially if we did our job right and kind of set the rules accordingly. I wouldn't be surprised for these sticky situations to come up. But it's also why we like when we start with GCs, we're like, look, this is what we are. There's no secret. Like, go to our website.
Mhm.
All of our revenue comes from products to subs. And that doesn't mean it's adverse to you, but like we developed this product so that would benefit subs. And guess who's paying for it? Subs, right? The revenue is through the sub.
Is there
Yeah,
any
I
like
think
go
I
for it,
like
Chris?
as I'm sitting here listening to you, one of the principles that I just don't think people connect the dots on this. Like the basic principle of business is where a problem is and it's solved, money changes hands. But and so everybody goes for this cheap idea. But as you're talking, it just makes me like identify with this idea. The faster you can get out of the conversation of talking about how you get paid, and if that one goes away, you can move your business exponentially farther forward as opposed to, trying to cut the anchors off with all these cash flow issues. Like, because a lot of people are really good at what they do. They're just not good business people, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the time our customers' instincts are right around business. They just don't have the right emphasis early on. The business owner is not meant to track cash flow, right? Let's be right. That's not their job. My job as CEO of Build is not, well, it is a little bit of track cash flow, but I have a daily cash report that I get every single day, and it breaks it down in quite detail, and I know what it is every single day, right? Because we have the right controls in place to monitor that and project. And it doesn't take a lot. That if anyone's listening to this, like the number one thing you have to do is have a daily, I mean, I prefer a daily P&L too, which says this is what, if you're established enough, you can do a daily P&L as well, which says our crews went out and did this and that was billable to this amount. But the first step is really just a cash report, which says you're every day this is the amount of cash, this is the amount we have in AP that we owe suppliers or other providers. This is what we have in liquid cash in our bank accounts. This is the receivables. This is the aging of those receivables, and so on. That's automatically, systematically going to be reaching out on those receivables. It is not a business owner problem to be calling GCs asking for payment. You've got
Hmm.
to have that motion within your
Hmm.
business, right? Does it escalate to that conversation? Yeah, and as a sub, I've had a lot of those conversations. But the like just the routine motion and the flag that says now it's time for that, like that is only going to take you a few hours to set up. And someone that's squarely responsible in their job spec, it says every day you will do this. And that's the biggest thing that subcontractors can do.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Is there a, Keith kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but is there like a common misconception that you just keep hearing around payments in construction that, Chris, if you could, to those 300,000 subs out there, that you could just help correct them on? Because again, Keith said this earlier, and same with my family too. Like debt, that the D word, debt, like all of
Yeah.
that is just something that they
Yeah.
want to stay far away from.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way they think of cash, right? And so that means that they're paying obligations with cash. So it hits those that are meant to be paid. So it comes out of your bank account. That is cash working against your capital stack, right? Before you've been paid for that. And so there's no way to look at your balance sheet to figure that out, right? And so what we can simulate it very easily and show that. That's probably the biggest thing. And I think it hits when people go through our process, they see it and they're like, oh shit, you're right. There's literally, it's just math.
Hmm.
There's no other way this can be true without me having 2 million of my cash and profits, retained profits, and in working capital. So that's probably it. I mean, I would also just say like we have our take, and I think you guys can see I have mine. But the subcontractor business is really fucking hard. It is hard. As is, and so guys, by the way, so is a finance business in construction. But like there's this like very romantic part of it that I think drives a lot of business owners. That's like, but this is the legacy, right? This is the legacy I'm building for my family. And like, this is a noble thing I'm
Hmm.
doing, right? This is like, whatever your trade is, like you're putting real stuff and building real things that matter. And that feels good. And yeah, you could do cybersecurity, blah, blah, blah. And like, that's cool too, I guess. And maybe the margins are a little bit better and they have their own unique problems, but subcontracting is hard. And like, just like stare at that in the mirror for a little bit and don't let people talking heads like me make you think that there's always this easy solution. It's not. Like I think we make 100%, we make every subcontractor in the country better just by having an option, not using
Hmm.
us even, like just having the option will make them better. But like it's hard. And like you get it, and a lot of technology tools out there being sold, a lot of this and a lot of that. Like there is no, just follow your instincts, manage the shit out of your business, take care of your people, invest in your people, make sure that they, and they have the right roles and responsibilities, pull the weeds early. That's really it in my opinion. And I talked to a lot of successful, subcontractor CEOs and founders, and like they all say the same thing, right? The lessons learned are always the same. Stop being so nice to your customers, know when to stop, run daily P&Ls, run daily cash reports, and take care of your people and get the right people on board and the wrong people out.
I think the thing that people miss, and I'll just say it like, and it probably re-say it in a different way than you just did. Like when we started taking and viewing the dollars that we were reinvesting in cash in the business differently, my life personally changed. Like we would care more about paying our bills for the business, and we would take less money out of the business.
Yeah.
But the only person who thought that was a good idea was the bonding company, who said, wow, your retained earnings continue to elevate like at a huge rate every year. And we're not, like, our lives weren't getting better. You're sacrificing everything to own this business. And when you can start pulling that money out and putting it to work and utilizing it in developing your legacy plays, whatever those are, it makes your family buy in. It makes the culture better because you have a better attitude about it. And you're not, and the risk to you as an individual business owner is much less because your business is adequately leveraged. That's the other piece that I think people with cash flow, they try to get out of these cash flow humps, but adequate leverage isn't bad,
Yeah.
right? Over leveraging is bad. But if you don't know which one is which, adequate leveraging feels like over leveraging. And it's just that inexperience and uneducated way to look at it.
And it does go back to a margin play, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you have to have, just like the cost of a scissor lift goes in your bid, the cost of working capital goes in your bid. And generally we see that anywhere from 2.5 to 5%. Depends on your capital stack. And so long as you're including that and managing it, just like you would equipment, material, labor, anything else, then the margin should be there. So when you say over leverage, right? Like over leverage only means one thing, which is the margin that I'm charging, or the cost structure in my bid either covers this expense or it doesn't, because you could be at 100% leverage, right? But if you're able to command that in price to include the cost, then that's even freaking better, right? Like that's the best thing. But so it has to be this balance of margin and not. And I get it, goes back to there's no easy answer, right? You get a lot of LinkedIn talking heads. Oh, well, like, margins, everything. Well, it's not freaking easy to put these margins in and win competitive jobs. So, focus, it goes back to focus on what you do, like your instincts and running good projects. Deliver to your customer as best you can, and remove all the other noise as much as you can. Then you can start commanding better margins. That's what's happening behind the scenes, right? Every GC that's listening to this, I don't know your GC followers, but like, they look at the bid sheet and they see, and they're like, that one's so easy, man. They just take care of everything. Like, okay, okay, it's $40,000 more on, with this kind of spread. Like, let me just figure that out.
Hmm. I'm kind of curious, Chris. We've really personally admired the champion of the sub, given kind of who we serve and who our customers are. I'm curious to ask you personally, though, what's been the most rewarding part about building this?
Um, man, it like, I'm just like every one of our customers, right? It's been a tough road for us. The people weigh on me heavily. I think this is what they don't teach you in CEO school, is how much that people problems all come to you, and they're personal problems, which for whatever reason, and that's health, family, everything, and that weighs very hard on you over time. I'm answering the opposite question because it's like the way there isn't really this, like, in my opinion, this like big gratitude. Like, I do think if I want my mark on something, I want it on this asset, right? And that is, I have, in my opinion, paved the way for one of the largest industries in construction to drive. We are not efficient capital right now, right? I know we can be way more efficient. Predictable pay, other structures like that. Every freaking day, every month, every year, we're driving that forward, right? And in 10 years, someone else maybe will replace us, right? Someone else will follow us, take all the stuff we did, go to our lending facilities and say, we did this too. They're following our footsteps. We paved the way for that. And that's what I want our mark to be, my personal mark in the industry. And I'll, just like our customers, look at the high rise, look at the hospital, look at the this, and they say, they drive by and they've got their son or daughter or whoever, and they say, I did that. That's what I want to do. And I know that sounds like kind of ridiculous, But that's what I'm super proud of that we're doing, and we are fucking doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be super proud, as maybe I move on to build or whatever that happens to be like, that's my mark on the industry.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Keith can resonate with that, given he was a paving contractor. So thanks for mentioning Pave the Way, Chris. We end our podcast with 5 questions to be answered in a sentence or less. These are rapid fire, Chris.
If 5 questions that are, say that again?
Rapid fire. So in a
Rapid fire,
sentence or
okay.
less.
Oh, okay.
What's one leadership lesson you only learned from being a dad? Deep sighs, is that one?
I guess like long-term patience. Yeah.
I know you're a cook, or you want to be a little bit. What's your all-time favorite dish to make?
I make some freaking killer caviar pasta right now, and lasagna.
Oh,
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah.
You're a skier, right? What's your favorite ski mountain?
Courchevel, France.
4, your one message to the next generation would be?
Call your dad.
That's awesome. I like it. 5. This is actually part of the company name, but what does bread to build mean to you?
What does
bread to build mean to you?
bread to build? I don't know what that means.
Well, it's the podcast show, but I'm curious the phrase. What does the phrase bread to build mean to you?
It's like kind of your DNA, right? Like, where did I come from, right? Like, I'm of this cloth and I'm a part of this group, and that's like who I am, and I'm not ashamed of it, and I love it.
Perfecto. Thanks everyone for listening to another episode of the Bread to Build podcast. If you like the episode, send it to a friend, drop an awesome review. Chris, where can people find and connect with you?
Build.com. Hit me up.
BILLD.com. Awesome, Chris. Thanks for coming on.